Our penultimate speaker before we close off this conference is Richard Ogden, who's going to talk about tax policies and economic growth and the way they are intertwined. I'm sure he'll deliver an excellent presentation. Just by way of introduction, Richard Ogden is a tax partner at Ernst Young. He specializes in advice to the airline and travel sector with clients in the UK, mainland Europe, and the Middle East. He is a frequent visitor to Malta. In fact, this is his 84th visit to Malta. And I was chatting with him before this event, and he said he's surprised, because of the difficulties Malta was facing, because he's been traveling so frequently here that he has definitely, he's surprised it was losing money. So he's a frequent visitor to Malta. He's a board member of the Malta Business Network in London. He knows Malta very well, and I'm sure he'll contribute to the value of this conference.
Well, hello. It's Friday afternoon. It's getting late. You've had a hopefully stimulating day and an interesting one. And I guess you're getting ready to go home. But allow me, if you will, to spend 15 minutes or so talking to you about some big shifts in global tax policy, which I think are quite relevant. So what I'm going to do when we get up and running here, I want to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why tax policy is shifting, is changing, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years. I'm going to look at some of the drivers for change, the impacts on globalisation, the impact on austerity, and the need that certain countries have to maximise their tax revenues, and see how that is all pulling together. And I'll do that very, very briefly. I also want to look a little bit at what organisations like the OECD are doing, the EU, the G20, the G8, and down to the level of tax authorities themselves. This is topical stuff, and it's going to affect all of us who deal with multinational enterprises. So what is driving all this change? There's a sense that large corporate groups have become bigger than countries. It's become the norm, and I've been doing this for 10, 15 years, for multinational organizations to exploit their vast global footprints to shift profits to reduce their effective tax rates. Tax to them is a cost to be managed like anything else. But to the OECD, to the EU, to national governments, tax paying is a social responsibility. And many are short of money, particularly in the older countries of Western Europe. They've got deficits to finance. So what we've been seeing is an almighty clash of these two forces coming together. The shifting global economy and accelerating pace of globalization. Look at this. Don't worry about on the left, look at on the right. This is a comparison of the location of headquarter companies between 2000 and projected forward on IMF figures to 2015. The location of the Fortune 500 big global companies. In China, in 2000, 2% of those companies were headquartered there. By 2015, we're expecting 14.8%. That's a massive, massive shift. On the other hand, look at the United States. In 2000, 35.8% of the global 500 companies were headquartered in the States. By 2015, that's going to come down to 24% on present projections. That is a huge, huge shift. Large corporates have been responding to that. I work particularly with airlines, and for the last 2 or 3 years, all I do for airlines is work in Latin America, Africa, India, and Asia. That has changed radically in the last 2 or 3 years. Companies have adapted to that. They've become bigger. They've had to spread further. And it's easy for them to find the way of moving their profits around to hide them from the taxman. Look at this. This is quite interesting, I think. Now, it's a busy slide, so let me explain what it does. Broadly, the green arrows are where tax take is reducing for each of those items. The red arrows are where the take is increasing. It is true that headline corporate income tax rates the world around are falling. The UK announced recently it's going to reduce its rate to 20%. But at the same time, look at all the red arrows. What is happening is that countries are legislating to broaden the tax base. That is what they can tax individually. So I'll pick up 2 or 3 of these items, interest and expense deductibles. That is really getting very hard in quite a lot of countries to get the deductibles you used to be able to get. Things like what we call thin capitalization rules. A lot of tax planning internationally has been based upon exploiting the ability to capitalize and finance your foreign subsidiaries by debt. You get a tax deduction there, tax receipts, and all sorts of things that follow from that. There are rules everywhere now to prevent you doing that, or at least limit your ability to achieve that kind of structure. And in particular, there have been a vast proliferation of so-called anti-abuse measures and a generally much more rigorous approach to tax enforcement. In many countries, including the UK, if we come up with a good idea, we have to tell what we would consider a good idea. We have to tell the tax authority at the time we tell the client. So they know. They can stop it if they want. And Western countries are hard up. We think on these projections that austerity is here to stay till at least 2017 and beyond. And so governments need to raise the tax revenues. So where are they getting it from? Now these are OECD figures. We don't have anything beyond 2008, but we've got our own internal projections. So this is, if you look at the changes in the individual colour lines, which are consistent, it's pretty clear that overall the composition of tax revenues for each type of tax is remaining broadly the same, has done since 1965. But since 2008, the corporate income tax component has been going down, and there's a major long-term trend for indirect taxes, particularly VAT, to go up. And it's a lot harder for tax planners to plan around VAT rules than it is to plan around corporate income tax rules. That is no coincidence. Corporate taxation generally. There's broadly 2 types of regime. The ones at the top, the ones with the worldwide tax regimes. What do I mean by that? That means in the US, broadly, subject to ability to defer taxable income, you pay tax on your worldwide income. That is becoming much, much less frequent. As corporate income tax go down, the concept of territoriality is taken over. Now that sounds like quite a good idea, but there's a catch. What do I mean by territoriality? It is that a country will tax the revenues that are earned locally. So, finance ministers of Western governments compete on tax rates, on relatively low headline rates. We're seeing that. We have the concept of territoriality, which says, I will only tax what you earn in my country, and I'll exempt what you earn from your overseas subsidiaries. And those particularly Germany, Italy, UK, Netherlands, and Switzerland, have really strongly gone down that route, where profits coming in from foreign subsidiaries are pretty much exempt from tax. So, you might say that sounds good, but, and George Osborne says, I'll tax what is mine, what is earned in the UK. What do you mean by the word mine? And that is where a lot of the change is coming. Now, I want to reverse the ownership of this a little bit. Don't worry again about the stuff on the left. I can see better the stuff on the right. Those are quotes from various newspapers over the last few months. New York Times, how Apple sidesteps billions in taxes. Google revenues, Facebook, Starbucks paid no tax on UK earnings in the past 3 years, and The Guardian has had this fantastic campaign to have a go at Starbucks. Been great news for my friends at Costa Coffee and really bad news for Starbucks. Starbucks paid no tax. Well, actually they did. VAT. They paid payroll taxes. They brought a lot of employment. But the notion was, well, a lot of coffee is drunk in the UK, hundreds of millions of revenues in the UK, so it should be taxed in the UK. But where's the coffee beans grown? Where's the buying expertise located? Not in Starbucks on Kensington High Street, it's not. Where's the brand ownership? Where's the concept developed? Where are the marketing brains? The tax planning that produced the position that Starbucks have got was perfectly legal, and from that perspective, quite legitimate. But the press and the public perception of Starbucks has gone through the floor now because of this headline, no UK tax paid. I want to read something to you. This is from the London Times yesterday about David Cameron and a letter he wrote to Herman van Rompuy and to José Manuel Barroso. Mr. Cameron said the next 8 weeks were crucial in channeling the public outrage against global corporations who dodge tax. Notice the emotive words. He pledged to make the G8 annual summit, which he's turning in Northern Ireland, a turning point in the battle against tax evasion. This is the blur between evasion and avoidance, and that has characterized the attitudes of governments and of the larger organizations very much in the last few years. The austerity, he says, faced by people across Europe is an added reason to act now. The loss of tax revenues is staggering in a period of fiscal consolidation where hard-working citizens and businesses are being asked to bear extra burdens. We need coordinated, truly global action to address these issues. Big, big change. Permanent establishments is one of those areas where there's been considerable change. The OECD on the left-hand side now. There's a major concern about companies dealing in digital goods and services. And what I will do now is quote to you from this document, which is February 2013, Addressing Base Erosion and Profit Shifting. This report shows that current international tax standards may not have kept pace with changes in global business practices, in particular in the area of intangibles and the development of the digital economy. For example, today it is possible to be heavily involved in the economic life of another country, e.g. by doing business with customers located in that country via the internet, without having a taxable presence there or in another country that levies tax on profits. In an era where non-resident taxpayers can derive substantial profits from transacting with customers located in another country, questions are being raised on whether the current rules are fit for purpose. This is really quite powerful stuff. Base erosion concerns. What does it mean, base erosion and profit shifting? Well, it's defined in here by the OECD as where profits are moved to where they are taxed at lower rates and expenses to where they are relieved at higher rates. And this goes directly back to the issue, the question I raised earlier, of what is mine for George Osborne? What's in his mind and the minds of his peers? And it's about maximising the tax base in the country which has gone for territoriality as a principle. And that, more than anything else, is the biggest change that has happened in the last 2 or 3 years. What the taxman gives with one hand, he takes away with the other. So, in the UK, the big four heads of tax were hauled up before the Public Accounts Committee last month, and at least the TV cameras given quite a hard time. A little bit different behind the scenes, but there we go. Now let's look at the European Commission, what they're saying, to give you a flavour of how this world is changing. In the old world, tax evasion was illegal and wrong, and it still is. Tax planning, equaled tax avoidance, was legal, and it's fair sport. And certainly in many systems, including the one I come from, the UK system, that was totally supported by judicial precedent. There are cases going back 70, 80, 90 years which supported the fact that you've no need to arrange your fares to generate the maximum taxable income. Right, so here we have another document. This is December 2012, a communication from the Commission to the European Parliament and the Council, an action plan to strengthen the fight against tax fraud and evasion. Fine. What it says is this. The Commission considers that there is a need to ensure that the burden of taxation is shared fairly in line with the choices made by individual governments. Currently, some taxpayers may use complex, sometimes artificial arrangements which have the effect of relocating their tax base to other jurisdictions within or outside the Union. In doing this, taxpayers take advantage of mismatches in national laws to ensure that certain items of income remain untaxed anywhere or to exploit differences in tax rates. Concrete action by all member states intended to remedy such problems would also improve the operation of the internal market. So there's big change. So shifting the tax base, shifting the profits to a country with a lower level of taxation is now aggressive tax planning and is contrary to the principles of social corporate responsibility, according to EC, and is as objectionable as tax fraud and tax evasion. That is putting a completely different cast on how large corporates can manage their affairs. Does this have any impact on Malta? Well, actually, you're in a good place. You've actually got a fairly high headline corporate tax rate. Your VAT is in line with European norms. And you don't market yourself, despite the fact you've got that nice trick of the 5% rate on repatriation of profits, you don't market yourself as a tax haven, which is a big no-no according to the OECD. And in any event, the real immediate focus of the OECD and the EU is on complex hybrid instruments, double non-taxation. There are a whole load of tricks whereby wave the magic wand and poof, profit suddenly disappears. An item's deductible here, but it ain't taxable anywhere else. And those are not areas where Malta features at all on the International Tax Planners agenda. They're a white list country. Are there any areas for some small concern? Maybe. I've had UK tax inspectors call Malta wrongly a tax haven because of that 5% rate. It's an attitude problem. And I'm slightly concerned about the ideas that the OECD has for taxing, dealing with permanent establishments, creating permanent establishments for businesses that deal in online activities, services and products, what impact that's going to have on things like online gambling companies. I think that's something to see what's going on. There's also this big public perception issue, Starbucks, Google, where corporates shift profits to where they'll be taxed at a lower rate. The good thing is Malta has got a fantastic reputation for total and great integrity, and maintaining that is just so important. You've got to do everything you possibly can, in my judgment, to do that. Making sure that there is tax transparency. There's a big move these days for countries to share information. Who's investing here? Who's got a bank account here? Share it, make it open. I think strengthening transfer pricing rules would be a good thing. OECD would like to see that. And visibly cracking down on tax evasion, that really helps consolidate reputation. Continuing also to be very selective about who does business, who can do business here, very, very important. So you're not immediately in line, in my judgment, and you've got some great advantages, and there's potential things that you can do, which we need to think about to actually make Malta more attractive from that perspective. Now, there is a big gap between the anguishings of the OECD and the EU on actual tax legislation. This is the current position for which countries have got general anti-avoidance rules. Had I shown you that 5 years ago, there would be an awful lot of grey on that map. Now, 69% of the countries that we've studied have got general anti-avoidance rules, and 26% of countries have something similar to that. Not technically formally a GAAR, but something like it. And only 5% of the countries we've looked at don't. That is a big, big shift. Now, you might be wondering, and I shall finish, Why I call this little talk 19 for you and 1 for me? Well, anybody here old enough to remember George Harrison and the Beatles? No? It's depressing. But I am. Now, I'm not going to sing this song, promise you, but I'm going to repeat it. Let me tell you how it will be. There's 1 for you, 19 for me. Because I'm the tax man, yeah, I'm the tax man. Should 5% appear too small, be thankful I don't take it all. Because I'm the tax man, yeah, I'm the tax man. The rates are coming down, but individual countries adopting this territoriality principle are working much, much harder to get what they see as their share, to suck in bits of businesses that were able to be moved overseas in the past. Now it's going to get a great deal harder, and they're developing ever tougher tools to do so. Thank you.